Okay, meeting recording is in progress. Great. So it is about 9 a.m. on August 27th, 2020. This meeting has been published through public notice. It's being held via WebEx due to the emergency directive issued March 22nd, 2020, which suspended the physical location requirements. That's why we have it virtually. This is to discuss proposed changes that we have to Chapter 557 involving our hemp programs. The following staff members of the Nevada Department of Agriculture are present. That's Ashley Jepson, myself with Plant Industry Division, Audrey Vaughnfield, also with our Plant Industry Division, Lisa Ortiz, and I believe Alexa, I did see you, Alexa Johnson as well. As mentioned, this workshop is being recorded, and those who wish to speak are requested to identify themselves for the record when we cue in for public comment. Okay, so just to get into it, these regulations that we're proposing are to use minimum requirements as required for the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018 and as detailed in the interim final rules. We're trying to make sure that we can still have a state program. So with that, we have to demonstrate that we're meeting these requirements and we're working in conjunction with USDA on that. Also, we have proposed a fee increase to allow us to adequately manage the program, which is required in the interim final rule. That might be folks on the phone with a little bit of the background. If you can mute yourself until it's queued, if you're on the phone, that would be great. So we'll start with public comment, and then we will go into some of the changes that are proposed. Looks like a little bit better. All right. If you haven't been able to review the changes, please feel free to email us. It is on our website. We're happy to send those out to you again. I do want to comment as well. There has been a change to the register document. LCD is drafting, and the register document is R145-20. And that was an upcoming. It looks like Alfred. Sorry, I'm probably not noticed. Is that a shot? Okay, gotcha. All right. So we'll start with some public comment, then we'll go into some of the specific changes that we have in our regulations, and then we'll open it up again for public comment. We want to hear from you. This impacts all of you. So first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I know we're in the peak production season, and it's crazy right now. So I appreciate you being here, reviewing the information, and providing your feedback. So with that, let's open it for public comment. For those of you that can raising your hand, I will call on you.
If nobody's going to ask any questions yet, I'll start.
Sure. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. This is Chris Rusby for the record. So where are we at on the plan? I did speak with Audrey within the last couple days. She mentioned that the initial plan that was submitted was rejected in certain respects, those being the equal parts stem and leaf, the harvest window. Was there anything else that the USDA raised issues with on our plan?
Yes. So specifically, that was part of why there was some confusion with the register document and why there were some changes. We had to update that rather quickly. So as you guys probably were on some of the calls with USDA, especially when we were doing public comment, we were under the impression that some of the sampling and then the negligent criteria and the harvest windows were under close review by USDA and were potentially likely going to change. Now, after they reviewed our state plan, they specifically told us that the negligent criteria, which we can go in more depth on, had to be addressed in regulation, and that's the biggest challenge there being crops that are 0.5% and above would be considered negligent. And if there's 3 or more of those in a 5-year period, their requirement would be that license is no longer permitted and revoked. So that was one of them that they highlighted, and then also the 15 days from sampling to harvest. And you know, as you guys saw in our public comment, we had concerns with that as well. And so they specified that that needs to be required as well, and that we needed to have some specific language in there involving definitions, which are in our draft as well, to include that margin of error piece. So there were several pieces that they needed more information, and some of which needed to be restricted for the piece to consider.
Okay. So what's your understanding of with regard to that harvest window? I think that's something that's concerning to a lot of growers. What have you heard? I know that it's been a topic that many states have raised issue with, and many states that don't have their plans approved and, you know, have had them rejected. That's one of the reasons why. What have you heard from the USDA as to them potentially reconsidering that and changing it later? And I'll use myself afterwards.
So basically, when we brought that very concern up, they said we understand, we've heard it, we've seen the comments. We are under review, and they indicated it was likely that they will be reopening it for public comment. But because it is in the interim rule as it stands now, they expect states to propose how they will meet it. So, you know, our plan is to do our best to meet that requirement, to make sure that, you know, industry knows that that's the expectation right now. But we will still be offering the resampling. We have to. And we want to give folks that second chance. So I'm hoping that this stands, or from my perspective, if a crop fails, we can try to get out there right away, and then there's a new sampling date based on that crop failure. So potentially we have that extra time to get that back to you and figure out where we're at. But I know still within that 15-day window, there are a number of challenges in getting it reported, planning, harvest, and knowing what your results are, which is why we had requested that it be 15 days after you receive your report of analysis. But they did not accept that. And yes, we agree that that's a challenge, and we submitted that information.
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, here's kind of what I've seen on this is over the last several years, the restrictions have been getting tighter for all of the growers, and it seems to be getting even more tighter now. If this is what the USDA is going to require to continue our program, we may be constrained in that regard, but there seem to be other ways where flexibility can be built in for the growers to make it more favorable for them. And I spent a lot of time last night going through other states' plans that have been accepted through all of the material through the Agricultural Marketing Service. And a couple of things stood out to me that I think that we should consider putting into some regulations or making them more favorable. The first thing, and Audrey came out and tested some crops at our farm within the last week, and we've been notified that one of our varieties on the initial test came back above 0.34, and that's the first time we've ever had that, and we've done many harvests. and it's really concerning for me. And so, you know, right now, when I observe Audrey doing the sampling, she's taking about the top 4 inches from the apex coa on the plant. And I was looking at the USDA, they have a sampling guidelines for hemp growing facilities. And these are kind of how they recommend things. And I've seen states that have incorporated this exact document into their plan and have had those plans accepted. And they are recommending that the top 1/3 of the plant be sampled. And if you have a 5-foot, 6-foot plant, that would be fair game for samples to be taken from the top 2 feet of that plant as opposed to the top 4 inches. Is that something that we can look at? We would get our plan accepted. That gives us some more flexibility in that regard and gives us a little bit better chance. And, you know, those of us that have been growing for several years, you know, things have been tough. We're hanging on by a thread at this point. And, you know, the further the restrictions get and the harder that it is to comply with, considering the financial loss and the cost going forward, I mean, it's just a matter of time before everyone just gives up on this whole idea. And so I'm going to turn off my mic now so you don't get the feedback. But what can we do to, you know, if we have the top 1/3 of the plant, we know the USDA will accept taking samples from, you know, why are we taking a much more restrictive approach than that and only allowing samples to be taken from the top 4 inches of the plant?
So, Chris, from our discussion with USDA, they made it sound like it was just following plant period. I am absolutely happy to reach out to them on whether they would accept that 1/3, and it sounds like you've seen that. So I am happy to reach out to see if that would be accepted, and if it is, and that meets the requirements, great. So I'll do that.
Yes. So in particular, South Carolina submitted their plan. Is there any way that you could mute the new?
There you go.
Okay. Where was I going with that? Oh, so South Carolina submitted their plan, I believe, and they were one that specifically included the sampling guidelines for hemp producers, which this is available from the USDA's website. You know, I think that it is under this, they have a section for sampling and things like that and guidance for sample takers. And so this document was in there, and I was looking to try and find ways, okay, if we're stuck with these certain things, where can flexibility be put in here? Because it's becoming extremely difficult, if not impossible, you know, to really continue performing, especially if we're going to make it 15 days and, you know, all these other things. So, I mean, what they're requiring is that the sample be taken beneath the bud, but it doesn't limit it to just the apex coa, the top 1/3 of the plant. So I think we need to look at that and find if there are other ways that we can take samples within that top 1/3 of the plant, which if it's a 6-foot plant, that gives us 2 feet of room. There's a lot of different flowers that can be taken from there that, you know, may give us a little bit better chance. Another thing, too, is on the method of uncertainty. So I have most of the plans that I've looked at that have been accepted, they don't mention anything about what their actual method of uncertainty is in their plan, which I found to be kind of interesting. And yet those plans were being accepted. I know ours is a 0.4, so it goes up to 0.34, but and none of those plans that have been accepted, they haven't explained that, and they haven't explained any type of methodology. And I looked at our plan too, and we didn't provide any data or backup on why we chose point 4 as being that method of uncertainty. And I see that as being another area where flexibility can be built in. In the IFRs that the USDA proposed, in fact, they use it as an example. They don't give criteria or tell you numbers, but they use 2 examples of, how the method of uncertainty would play out. And one of them is 0.06. So again, here's another circumstance where we have an even more restrictive approach than even the examples that the USDA provides in their IFR. And so, what can you kind of tell us about that method of uncertainty? How was that data collected and that number reached? And maybe we can talk about that being another area where some flexibility can be built in, where it would still pass muster with the USDA, essentially.
Yeah, so we've been working with our chemistry team to see if it's supposed to be lab. It's supposed to be where you're seeing your range within your lab. We do go through proficiency testing with Kentucky to kind of verify our standards, see where our ranges are, and we have done an internal assessment of where we're seeing our ranges. And it was actually just completed again, and we were at 0.349 with the NAC based on our measurement of uncertainty. So that's, we're trying to base it off of what we're seeing in our lab because that's the intent of this federal law. We can keep assessing this and keep having this conversation with the USDA, but based on the intent of how we've read it, how we've interpreted, the intentions, and based on our USDA conversation, that's what they want to see. And that's what we've experienced directly in our lab. They have assessed where their range is, with 0.349 being on that. I'm happy to still look at where there's flexibility on that. And we can try to word the regulation, whereas if we're seeing anything different in our lab, if it's definitely more favorable for our growers, we want to do that.
Well, that's what I think that the real point is. There's a certain spirit in this. I think that no state government or the federal government would have spent the time to pass this legislation and then do these regulations only to have it so strict that it effectively kills it in utero. And that's what we're seeing right now. We've been farming for 3 years now. We've done, a bunch of different varieties. And I have not seen any variety that truly can comply with the requirements that are being imposed now. Maybe there are some out there, maybe it's an outlier, but we've experimented with a ton of different varieties, and I've never seen one that go to full term will work. And so, even if the data that you have done or the chemists have done gets you to that point where it's 0.4, if what I'm really trying to convey here is that Nevada should be taking the least restrictive approach possible that still complies with the USDA requirements. Even if the data is showing it should be something less, if that is an area that is not going to cause problems with the USDA, then we need to be as flexible as possible in that regard. If it's 0.4 and that's what your data is suggesting, if we can expand that sample, or we can even build in a margin of error to that and raise that to 0.8, then there is no reason that we should not be doing that. And, from another perspective as well, Nevada, as an agricultural state, we're not a real big powerhouse compared to some of these other states like Oregon and California. And we have a hard enough time competing as it is. And I think that it needs to be the policy of this department and the state to really kind of go to bat for our farmers in all of this. I have seen senators, I've seen the head of the Department of Agriculture from Oregon and from Colorado that actually advocate to the USDA on behalf of their farmers for certain changes, like one being, the 15-day testing window, the criminal penalties, the negligent violation, as well as the total THC number, which I know the USDA has taken the position that it'll take an act of Congress to increase that. But, the point I'm trying to make here is, the NDA should be our voice, and we want to help with that. But, the NDA has certain resources and power that we don't have, and we need you guys kind of advocating for us that these certain changes need to be made, and they're so problematic because of this, and we're a small agricultural state. And, that can be through working with our national elected representatives as well as our governor in communicating with the USDA or, other members of Congress. And I really just kind of want to impart that I haven't seen that yet from the NDA. I did read your guys' comments to the IFRs, but, is there any reason, or would you guys consider or be willing to help advocate actually for us on this national level and try and help with some of these standards?
So I will say our director has worked extensively with the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture on submitting comments and concerns of the hardships that some of these put on growers. That would be a question really for our director, but I know that a lot of the comments have been expressed to USDA, have been expressed to other members as well, and the challenges that they can pose, and especially from an implementation standpoint as well. With that, so I'm going to open it up for other comments too. Thank you. I appreciate your assessment. Okay. At this point, if there's anybody else that wants to raise their hand, or I'm not seeing hand raised. I don't know if that's what's right. I see it. Come on in the chair. Robert Daniels, let me unmute you here, and you're good to go. Thank myself.
Well, thank you. I don't want to take too much time here because I represent a whole different area of interest, and that's in the industrial hemp, not in the CBD, not in the THC areas. But the Nevada Industrial Hemp Fiber Cooperative is on a 5-year run to build something that doesn't exist today. We have 385,000 acres of some of the finest alfalfa being grown in the world, and a lot of those farmers have tried pivots of cannabis sativa indica for as what the slang word would be marijuana, but there hasn't been any real concerted efforts to stick industrial hemp fiber in the ground yet because, like Chris said, we're not a powerhouse. Governor's Office of Economic Development doesn't even have agriculture in their drop-down window as a job generator or, with the advanced manufacturing. So I don't want to take up too much time, but I just wanted to say that the rules are predominantly oriented towards the current CBD growers. And there's inconsistency in the word between hemp and in the document, and I think that's confusion in the marketplace. So I just wanted you guys, there are 3 members from the cooperative on the board on this presentation, the president, the treasurer, and myself, the secretary. We will be submitting more and more documents to NDA with regards to the industrial uses and the less stringent testing that is required for those products or those crops. The industrial hemp fiber cannot be held to the same standards because it's not going to be used primarily in the consumer markets and the FDA area. This is for industrial use purpose. So I just want to go on record by saying that there seem to be some inconsistencies between the word industrial hemp, and hopefully maybe over time our NDA would help lend some clarity to the confusion in the marketplace with regards to there's industrial hemp, there's medical hemp, there's recreational hemp. Maybe we do some a little bit more descriptive so that we can get some standards going, because without proper technical governance at the state level, we're going to have 52 seed producers again like we had 2 years ago, not for fiber, but everybody wants to create their own branding. Everybody wants to get a marketing leg up on something. And what I'm telling you is that I think the NDA has gone the right direction by defaulting to AOSDA certified seed. Where we would need your help is in the contribution of driving down seed costs if we're going to use standardized certified seed once the varietals are established in the state of Nevada. Then we can turn to the National Hemp Associations, which there are a number of them around the country, and we can put some pressure on seed growers or come up with strategies for seed growing on a regional basis. But these things are for the future. They're not current, like Chris's needs right now, and I don't want to take any more time up on that, but I just wanted to go on the record for that. Thank you.
Thank you. I apologize. I did have on my mention that we had received some comments involving the language challenges for industrial hemp actual producers. And I want to mention too, we did receive comments from another producer on concerns of fee increase. My still coming through on my camera froze. Concerns of the fee increase for those that are just selling hormones that are not going to flower. So that was a concern as well. So thank you for that. Other comments?
Yeah, hi. I have my hand up.
Okay, go ahead. Can you say, what's your name for the record? I do apologize. I think I just accidentally muted you. I don't see your name, so I can't unmute you.
Okay, so I just...
what's your name for the record? James, is that James?
I'll get to it. So, Jim McCoy or James F. McCoy, that's me. And when Krishna brought up the 1/3 of the plant, I was just wondering if there was any thought of homogenized mass of the third of the top of the plant. And I have some concerns regarding if we test hot 3 times in a 5-year period, because last year I tested over 20 varieties and 3 of them were hot. So am I now under the new regulations? Would it no longer be eligible because I was trying to do R&D? And that would drive me to go underground for my R&D, where I would have it tested from a third-party test source before I would call you guys, and that's not right? So there are I have some concerns there.
You are correct that testing must be done through our office. We will look at what Chris brought up for the 1/3. We'll look at what was accepted and we'll have a discussion with the on that. In terms of previous crop tests that were over 0.5, that will not apply. It would be moving forward. And the department also expressed concerns over that requirement, as many other state departments have acted, which is why we have left it out of our state plan. But we were told in order to move forward, we need to have the ability to do just that. What we've tried to do on language, and again, we haven't gotten a document back from the Legislative Council Bureau that have that we're meeting how it's written now or as for federal requirements. So if they reduce that or they change it, again, they received an extensive amount of comments on, we have the ability to revert to just minimum requirements.
So I understand that, the previous failures wouldn't be applied, wouldn't be retroactive. Okay, I understand that. But there's still a future ahead of us. I mean, if we are done with research and development and we have genetics that will not go past 3.5, let's rock and roll, but that's not a reality. And one other thing to bring up is, and Robert touched on it a little bit, is the varietal. So it's kind of the purpose. If you're growing that's going to be for an extraction, it kind of, that should be a different set of parameters versus growing for fiber versus growing for what some people think smokable flour, right? Smokable flour should be the biggest concern if you're looking at those numbers, because that's going to go straight out to the consumer. Where extraction process, I mean, once you extract it, you can separate it, and it's moot. You know, whatever your THC level is kind of moot, unless somebody's extracting and selling off the THC. And of course, fiber, North Carolina, for the last 2 years, they've been trying to grow Chinese varieties, you know, from their Department of Agriculture. These are pre-approved varietals, and they've been going hot. I mean, and not one, I mean, it's huge crop. So, again, if it's for fiber, who cares if it's going hot? Really? You know, maybe the destruction plan is chop the top off and grow it away and then you still have the fiber. I'm not sure, but it would be a shame to have somebody have to destroy a couple hundred acres of a fiber variety or something like that. Yeah, I'm done.
Appreciate your comment, and yes, we're aware of those concerns from the industry, and unfortunately, the federal regulations that have come out don't allow for the separation. There's concern of how to regulate it from that perspective and not have everybody claim that it's fiber when it's not intended for that use, and of course having, you know, the differentiation between marijuana and hemp and psychoactive effects in hemp, and there's challenges on the implementation of compliance programs based on what people are saying and growing from. So that's a USDA stance, and we're encouraging people to still submit their comments and recommendations on how to address that, but we'll have to meet those minimum requirements for interim final rule. So I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Make sure everybody has opportunity. I see your hand, Robert. I want to give everybody else a chance first, and then we'll circle back if we have something else. I also want to have an opportunity to get through some of the changes and talk through what we've proposed to USDA and what hasn't been accepted, and hence why we've taken this direction on the regulations. I think that'll help us too. And also, Chris, I'm happy to share with you the comments that we got back from USDA. It doesn't highlight all of our phone conversations, but it kind of gives you a picture of what we're dealing with as well. Any other questions on this? Okay, we'll go ahead and end it with you, Robert, and then we'll go into some of these regulations. You're still muted. Hold on just a second. Sorry. Let me get you. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I think what we're seeing in talking with farmers, you know, we're trying to get this cooperative up and running, and we are constantly running into farmers, and we're not. I think I saw a number somewhere that 65% of our farmers in the state of Nevada are under 50 acres. I'm not sure if that's an accurate number or statement or not. And it would certainly be a plausible reason why a lot of farmers would get into the revenue potential of CBD and moving forward and everything, because for, you know, the type of revenue that was allocated to these guys was very attractive. What we're targeting is the large alfalfa farmers, not that they would convert their their crops, but they would take into consideration planting an additional 10%, giving us 40,000 acres of industrial hemp fiber. That infrastructure doesn't exist today because we're not talking about extraction. We're talking about counter-current reactors using high-speed water to separate fast fiber from herds. We're talking about mechanical decorticating at the lower end, and there is a number of advanced technologies moving in. But for the people that are on this call, if I would be careful about using the wrong varietals to grow fiber or to try to make a case for growing fiber. It takes about 3,200 acres to keep a decorticator going about 250 days a year at 1 ton an hour. But I want to encourage you all that the properties of industrial hemp, the varietals that are out there that you can get cellulosic material out of, some of that cellulosic material, and there's about 30 different varieties of cellulose. I'd like you to start looking into this because, frankly, artificial CBD, synthetic CBD is already in the petri dishes of large pharmaceuticals. All right, it's only a matter of time. And I'd encourage y'all to take a look at the fiber varietals, the grain as well. You can get 600 pounds of grain out of an acre if you grow it right. That'll generate 300 gallons of hemp oil, which has got a nice about $20 a gallon right now in the marketplace. But our market is not there. The infrastructure is not there to really, the machines to harvest it are not there. It's going to take 4 or 5 years, but please start looking in this zone because, you know, at $2 to $35 a gram for crystalline nanocellulose coming out of industrial hemp, that's a heck of a market right now today. There just isn't enough infrastructure around to make it happen. So I'd encourage everybody on the phone, as you do your strategy moving forward, please consider true varietals of hemp for fiber as we move forward. We are not going to GMO anything. We're going to work very closely, we hope, with NDA on their position about using AOSDA certified seed because hemp will morph over time. And I don't, you know, as the secretary for the Nevada Industrial Hemp Fiber Cooperative, I don't want to have to deal with hemp that's morphing and seeds that are being GMO'd because that's what that guy wants to do or that gal wants to do. We need to have some real strong technical governance over the next 3 to 5 years. And standards is a part of that. I don't have the answers how we're going to get there, but it's the journey we got to take. I'll shut my mouth, and that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, again, towards the end, if any of us have any concluding comments, we'll have opportunity for that. Let's go ahead and jump into some of the regulation drafts that we have. And again, this is still being fully drafted and considered by our Legislative Council Bureau. We wanted to get the ball rolling because we need to have an approved state plan by October 31st. So we're under crunch time. We're doing our best to try to reflect that. We definitely want to make sure that we can move forward with the program. All right. So you guys have received the documents via email. And they are posted on our website. I should have been transitioning. Okay. I'm going to try to share a screen here. It's not working quite right yet. Okay, are you guys seeing the regulations?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So we were trying to kind of give a little background to LCD as we submitted these in addition to you guys as well. So that's kind of the narrative giving the background on why we're submitting these requests. So I'm going to jump right in. Okay, so key participants were something that needed to be defined as well as acceptable sea level and measurement of uncertainty. Key participants, this definition is straight from the interim final rules. This is something we've been asking for as of the recent applications, and as once we have it in regulation, it will be a requirement. Again, this is a federal requirement. They have to list those that are directly or have a direct or indirect financial interest in the entity producing hemp, owner, partnership, etc. And the big piece here is this ties into the criminal background. A lot of folks were having issues with, some compliance issues with some of the business partners within these entities popping up and disappearing. So it was a means of looking at history and if there were any drug-related criminal charges, and this provided the opportunity to capture that from those that are directly involved, not necessarily just that apply with their names. So that's what it's trying to address. For acceptable hemp sea level, this is one of the specific areas that USDA said needed to be included in our regulation. That's not how we'd initially read it. And really what it's trying to tie in is that measurement of uncertainty has to be reported and be part of our analysis. It also has the dry weight piece, which is a requirement that we received quite a bit of comment back from USDA on, making sure that we have a method for assessing the dry weight. So that was the intent here. We pulled this definition is not my favorite. We pulled this straight from USDA. This is the one that they preferred us use. But the intent is to capture those two things I just mentioned. And then here is also the definition outlined in the interim final rule on measurement of uncertainty. So that range for which a crop value could pass. Again, that 0.3 has to be within that range. And it's supposed to be lab specific from our conversations and in reviewing the interim. And then a lot of the struck out areas are stuff that are just no longer valid and that were repealed with SB 347 as we went with the 2018 Farm Bill. So the pilot and research program are based off of the 2014, which is no longer valid for these regulations. So this area I'm assuming you guys will see where I'm moving. The department determines that the application adequately describes the intended production and jurisdictional approval. So really we want to see here that what's being reported for jurisdictional approval is accurate and is not being falsified. We've had a lot of complaints from different government agencies on not having these things run by them and that they're in violation with some of their specific ordinances. So we're trying to make sure that we're all maintaining that level of communication and that those requirements are being met, whether it's zoning or water rights and so forth. Working together. If the applicant has not been convicted of any state or federal felony related to a controlled substance in any form within the 10 years immediately preceding the date of application, this is in the new, this is in the 2018 Farm Bill. Before we had 5 years, so this needed to be modified to 10. And also, as I mentioned, the key participants need to be identified on that application and meet that requirement as well for some clarification. So our sampling protocols, we have authority in 557 for sampling and testing. I'm trying to be more specific here on what that expectation is. Right now we have sample of flower material. That is specifically what USDA followed up with in their comments to our state plan of their expectation. So that's why we put that verbiage there. But we also, in case they change that, and it is a more lenient standard or other acceptable sampling methods described in federal law. So that's what we were aiming for there. Again, Chris, we'll look at whether they're accepting something that's more lenient, and we will go with minimum if that's accepted by USDA. Okay, one of the other requirements is that information be reported to Armed Service Agency. These are the specific fields that they have listed. There's a lot of benefits to this. We just want to make sure that it's happening, and if it's not, that we could take, non-compliance action to make sure it is reported. This is a benefit of a lot of federal programs that would benefit our industry, are contingent upon this reporting, and it did impact us previously, and that a lot of this wasn't taking place. It wasn't required before, but we want to make sure moving forward that this is done for reporting and accountability, but also for to help us apply or help us qualify for some of the federal programs. USDA wanted to make sure that we were very clear on the dry weight basis piece. There's a couple things that we're trying to do on that. We're trying to do a lab analysis to confirm our procedures for drying the sample. And if they deem that our procedure is consistent with the dry weight concentration, then we potentially wouldn't necessarily have to do a dry weight analysis for each sample. But we're still waiting on whether that will be accepted. It would expedite the lab process, and definitely would be preferred, but they may require flat out dry weight be analyzed in the case. I think we'll have a strong argument, but we'll see how that goes. But regardless, we needed to have that language in our regulation. We also put in, that meets federal requirements. So again, if there's any shifts, we can go to the standard. And that the analysis reports that go to our producers need to include that acceptable hemp THC level, which is defined previously. In response to our state plan, they also indicated, USDA also indicated that the particles could grow within 15 days of sampling per the interim final rules. Again, we're within the time frame established by federal law in the event that they can change it. As I mentioned, from talking to USDA, it sounds like they will be reopening for public comment. So as has been discussed on this call, there's definitely some concerns from a number of the public, so we'll take advantage of that when it comes out, and we will be sure to notify you as well. This language that it struck out really was contingent on it still being a Schedule 1, hence still being a Schedule 1. Now that that's removed, we don't need to have this extra layer of oversight. So it's striking some of the language that varietals and so forth need to be reapproved. We still encourage folks to report that. So if we've seen a lot of non-compliances associated with a specific varietal, we can kind of warn people. We know how much is being invested in the tree, so we're making this certainly will do our best. We are proposing to raise the fee from $500 to $900 just to cover program costs. We're trying to get a dedicated chemist, another position in the Las Vegas office. Right now, we've been pulling staff where we can because getting a position takes a significant amount of time and is very challenging. So we've been doing our best to try to fill the sampling, but we have pending requests for additional staff to get out there and perform sampling, and we're doing our best to diversify our current staff to assist you too. But as mentioned, there's costs with the chemical analysis, there's costs with all the application reviews, mapping, and reporting to USDA, and meeting all of their federal expectations. And we have to demonstrate that we have the program structure to meet that. This fee increase was based on, basically we laid out the staff that we've needed and that we're requesting on top of the supply and equipment needs that have been ongoing to show that we can cover our costs with the ultimate goal. We do also hope in the future that we'll have staff that are able to help coordinate trainings, to help coordinate whether it's a conference where folks can come together and talk about their challenges or opportunities and establish partnerships or whatever it may be to help bolster this industry as well. and mental health support staff to do that service. The same that goes for the hourly rate. You all know how much time our inspectors are spending going out and getting samples, especially depending on when everything is planted. So to continue to cover those costs and to support additional inspection staff is why we increase $60. And we're doing that across the department in several different programs as well. So this fee for the $150 for making revisions, really what we're getting is if there's a request where it's really requiring another application review or it's a significant change to an application that's going to require a certificate to be reissued to confirm grower permission, there's costs associated with that. And we also, want people to try to be as spot on as possible when we first put in those applications. However, we know that there are changes. So this would allow us to have a modified fee involving any revisions, particular to issuing certificates. That's where a lot of the work goes into. If it's something minor and it's just we need to update our database, not a problem. But once we have to reissue certificates, it's time consuming. I will say as well, in terms of our application fees and our inspection fees, we're still trying to group inspections as much as possible. So the more advanced notice you can give us, we'll try to group you so that the costs are lower. But I know we can't always control what's happening with the crop, obviously. So there's challenges there too. Just rare. Per interim final rule, testing procedures must include the conversion of Delta-9 THCA into THC using a post-carboxylated or similarly reliable method. And we have it, and there are other methods that meet federal requirements. So if they ever change, what their methods are, we potentially would have the ability to revert to minimum standards. But their concern is the psychoactive effects. So naturally occurring Delta-9 does not reflect that. I've seen very high concentrations that would pass the Delta-9 that had very high levels of potential THC, which has psychoactive effects. So that's the reasoning behind and making sure that it has this piece of and also we included, it used to say 0.3, we want to keep it up to accessible hemp THC levels so that whenever federal regulations are being modified, it's reflected here. Now this dives into this portion here, 557.140, 3 that's been added. There needs to be a crop. We need to make sure that the crop disposal plans comply with federal law. That cannot enter into commerce. There's a number of pieces that are listed in the interim final rule, and we're trying to just meet those. And the plan needs to be pre-approved by the department to make sure that people don't just randomly dispose of the product and it wasn't confirmed and we don't know what happened to that. Here is, another specific area, item 3, that was required of us to include for USDA, and this ties into what we've previously discussed. If the crop exceeds 0.5%, or as we have listed here, acceptable hemp THC level, a negligent under federal law is what we're trying to capture for that 0.5. And within 3 times within a 5-year period, the certification has to be revoked and denied for a period of 5 years. That specific language, the 3 times within a 5-year period, and denied for 5 years from that third violation is straight out of the interim final rule. So they have defined negligent criteria. There's 3 different pieces. There's the 0.5% or above of the THC levels, there's failure to register, and there's failure to provide legal location. We have those other 2 already in regulation. So we were thinking that if we just folded it in this way, that would be adequate because we could still take action, and it would, those are listed as negligent criteria. So there was combined compliance and to be able to react appropriately. So just a little context on that. Okay, I think that summarizes our changes. Again, if any of you are having trouble accessing this, please reach out to us. We're happy to send it directly to you, and of course we will be getting a copy from Legislative Council Bureau. Give me just a second. I'm trying to share here. There we go. Now I got you all back. Okay. So now we are in the next item of our agenda, back to public comment. So please make sure that you limit your public comment to 3 minutes. And we'll jump back in. Terry, your hand up and unmute you. Unmute myself.
Hi, this is Terry Bass. It seems like most of your documents you have a strike through in the word industrial, and I just want to remind everybody that we really are trying to start an industrial segment of the hemp industry in Nevada. So are we going to reinstitute those words or define it differently?
We've adopted, for the actual hemp definition, we've adopted specifically what's from the 2018 Farm Bill. Because so much is tied to that with compliance, they haven't separated it. And really the standards will be the same. There's no separation in the standards there. So at this point I think it might also create confusion, but we can assess that. Thank you. Other comments? Just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. I see it correctly for you, Robert. I just want to make sure somebody else hasn't had a chance to speak. I don't have any opportunity. Is there anybody on the phone? You can speak up. Again, if you're having any technical issues, please feel free to send written comments to Alicia or myself or any of our teams. Okay. All right, Chris. Okay. I'll mute myself.
Thank you, Chris Rusby, for the record. A couple of things that I see that I believe need to be altered in these regulations. I'll start with first, it's NAC 557.100, which subsection 2, which has to do with the prior convictions. The federal law also has an exemption for anyone who is in the program prior to the 2018 Farm Bill, that they would not be excluded because of a felony conviction within a certain time.
Yep, you're absolutely right.
There may be people that fall within that category, and I think that should be amended to account for them as well.
Agreed. Thank you.
Another thing that I pointed out, so this is under NAC 557.140 subsection 1. And it looks like this was original language from the prior version. But so basically as it reads, if you fail a test, even if it's under that 0.5 mark, the NDA has the authority to revoke your certification and registration, and I think that that needs to be deleted, that there wouldn't be the authority for that under the current statutes or federal law. So that would be one thing. I think we would just need to take that out. And then a couple other things, just so that I'm clear on this. In NAC 557.100 of that initial paragraph. So in these applications, the applicant is now going to be required to submit an FBI background check for every person who is defined as a key participant. Is that correct?
That's how it's written here. We can double check to make sure that is, I think that's what USC is requiring. We can definitely double check if I'm off there.
Yeah, I'm not sure about this. I don't know. It's an extra burden on the growers, and, so that's one aspect of it. But it could be problematic in other aspects too, and I just caught this now, is if you have, say, there are companies out there that have investors and other things like that that are, let's say, an LLC or something, you don't even know who some of those investors could be, and it could be, if you have to go get a background check for them, which would require their consent and permission, that could be problematic, and from certain applicants' perspective. I just wanted to point that out. I haven't really thought it through, but I see the potential for big problems there that could just disqualify many growers from the start because of the inability to even get a background check for those people if you've never even spoken with them. And then also, I did have one question. Are these rules, are they going to apply to this growing season?
So, because, as of October 31st, the 2014 Farm Bill isn't active anymore, period. So the expectation is that November 1, we're under the state plan is what we're supposed to be operating under, which would link with these regulations. If we're given an extension on that, I'm happy to look at that, but as of October 31st, and if we have these adopted, yes, it would be active by that standpoint.
Well, and I suspect that there probably won't be many tests performed after October 31st for fall flowering crops unless it's in greenhouses. That is another area of concern, considering that, crops were planted many months before these regulations were even proposed, and to change the rule essentially within the last weeks of a 6-month crop places a real undue burden on the farmers. There was no way that we could have done anything to adapt under those circumstances. So that'd be one thing I'd ask the NDA to consider. And then another, so I looked through the IFRs as well as the statutes of the 2018 Farm Bill, and it does not appear that there is a time limitation as to when a state can submit its proposed plan or have it accepted. That if a plan is not accepted by October 31st, that there could be a lapse from submitting a plan after that date, it would just result in a little bit of lapse. Is that your understanding as well?
We've asked that specific question, and USDA keeps sticking with plans need to be in by the state. Whether we will consider extensions on that or programs to proceed, we don't know yet. And that we don't know yet is risky. So we want to plan accordingly. But if we hear they'll allow for an extension, we'll definitely look at that to get through this season on the sampling protocols.
Okay. Have you, in the discussions that you've had with the USDA, have they made any indication one way or the other whether they intend to, kind of push that deadline back? I know that that's been a thing raised by many states, is that basically need more time to work things out before that October 31st expiration of the 2014 bond bill.
No, we have not gotten a strong feeling that they're going to push it back. Doesn't mean they won't, but we're just trying to plan ahead. Okay.
And then just one last thing that I'm curious about, from compared to last year, where I know we had 216 registered growers, this year has that number increased or decreased?
It's definitely dropped. Audrey, I don't know if you're on, if we're closer to about 100. So more reflective of our 2018 numbers. Audrey,
I am on. Let me check the number really quick for you so it's live. So as of August 10th, we had 100 certified growers this year.
I'm sorry, Audrey, say that again. It cut out right as you said 100 something. What was it again?
As of August 10th, 2020, we had 112 certified growers.
Okay, so that's actually a decrease from 2018. And I point that out because I think that is reflective of the state of affairs of the hemp industry. And if the numbers, if we have actually seen a regression from 2 years ago prior to, that is a signal that hemp farming is becoming extremely difficult and risky for the growers. And I think that's just more evidence that we need to find ways where we can build flexibility in for the growers wherever, or otherwise, the numbers are only going to continue to decrease, if not be eliminated entirely. And that's all the comments that I have at this time. Thank you. I'll pass the mic.
Okay. Additional comments? Okay. You're good to go.
I'm sorry, am I on?
You're on.
Okay. Chris, thank you very much for your very, very, very in-depth observations and time you've taken to peruse this information. Just a simple grammatical thing. Section 557.130. If you're going to strike the word industrial, you still got 4 instances of the word industrial in there. So for consistency in the document, you want it to just be hemp. You need to strike those 4 terms out in that paragraph. And then just a closing comment. In fairness to the CBD growers, the guys that are really oriented in that market, this would be a state level issue, but I think some kind of oversight on the planting of male and female plant varietals is necessary. If one of my guys, if we start getting momentum and I get an alfalfa farmer wants to grow 100 acres of male varietal and it's co-located or somewhere near somebody that's already growing and we don't know about it, I think we need some oversight from the state saying, well, how are we going to adjudicate this? Because the male will dominate the female, or it will destroy a crop. I think we need to address that. We become more of a pain in the neck of the farmers and more prevalent in the farmers. I don't want to upset anybody's existing revenue opportunities. So we're going to need some guidance from the state on that about when we give you coordinates and stuff like that on our applications. I think you need to be prepared to tell us, well, you're in violation or the state has a rule that says the following. And I don't know if we have anything like that in place yet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm, one thing, I might have a follow-up. Chris, were you referring to, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to keep this, NAC 557.140, when you said how we have it worded is that any non-compliant crop would be deemed negligent. You were talking about section 3?
No, I was
2?
referring to NAC 557.140 subsection 1. Where, so the beginning of 557.140 talks about testing procedures must include conversion of delta-9, basically THCA, and that if determined that the sample exceeds that on a driveway basis, the department may, and then it has subsection 1 and 2. And 1 is revoke the certification and registration of a registrant. So technically, as it's written right now, if on the rerun of the sample that we just had done a couple days ago that came in slightly over 0.011% over, under the language as it's written, you would have the authority to revoke my certification and registration for that. And I don't think that comports with Nevada law or the federal law.
Yeah, the intent is to be able to revoke if there's failure to dispose of the crop. We'll work with LCD on refining that language. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And I did have, and that's if somebody else wants to ask a question, I do have another one that I'm sorry I didn't raise before. But if somebody else wants to talk, I'll wait my turn until the end.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm looking at the small business impact analysis statement, and I remember I participated in that survey. And so it appears that it indicates that these proposed regulations, according to the participants of that survey, 65.12% indicated that this would pose a significant economic burden on them. Based on my familiarity with the Administrative Procedure Act and the Small Business Impact Statement, was any effort made by the NDA to reach out to the survey participants to determine why that would have an impact on their business?
Well, we had the secondary question too there of, it being, sorry, you said the adoption of the federal regulations. We received several comments, and based on some of our previous meetings and based on this whole process, you're giving us the information on where that financial cost is, economic burden.
Sure. I just remember the survey, it containing 2 questions with some circles that you would click on, but that there wasn't any really follow-up on that. And I just wanted to to know, I mean, did the NDA reach out to any of those participants for follow-up questions or anything like that? Because it appears in here that was done according to how things were worded in the small business impact statement, and I just wanted to know, were people contacted and talked to about why it would be such a significant economic burden on them?
We've received comments on it, yeah. And we summarize those in the small business impact.
But did the NDA...
Please let me know.
Did the NDA reach out to anyone apart from the survey?
Apart from the survey, yeah, we have through a number of different channels. We've been receiving comments on the concerns for this over the last year.
I mean, within the last, so this survey was conducted on first notified 7/29, so within the last month. I mean, has the NDA reached out to anyone and asked them questions about why it would be such an economic burden on them?
Yeah, we've had discussions with growers in the field. We've had, some email discussions, phone conversations.
Were those initiated by the growers or by the NDA?
Mm-hmm.
Are there notes or records reflecting what those people indicated were the problems?
We just summarize what we've received in the small business impact. There's a lot of stuff that we've heard. Again, if I missed something on that for economic impact, you guys please let me know.
Well, and the reason I ask is, I know my own concerns, but there may be other people that have different concerns that, maybe I haven't considered or I don't quite comprehend yet. And I'm trying to figure out if there is a document or something that I can request so that I can review that information.
We received one written comment back, and we could definitely give you an some dialogue on that. And we'll have things summarized. Let me think about it. And then again, if anybody on this call or moving forward has anything else that I've missed on economic impact in the small business impact, I mean, we've worked with our growers pretty extensively on this issue for quite a bit of time. Please let me know. You can share that with us.
Yeah. If I can add, a lot of the feedback that I received was also during inspections when I'm inquiring growers about their own struggles and things that were difficult when it came to their growing or running their facility. So I would not have a written record of those kinds of conversations, but feedback from the growers directly was summarized in that economic impact analysis to kind of assess and include some of that feedback from 2019 growers. And generally speaking, if I could briefly summarize, they were just saying the upfront costs were high, it's hard to get labor, it's hard to find varieties within reason that are priced within reason. So all those comments are mainly just from growers directly and feedback that we have received that wasn't necessarily written from the growers.
Yeah, there's just been a lot of different forms of communication throughout the entire time.
So what's kind of the NDA plan going forward on this? I think we've kind of highlighted that in these proposed regulations, there are at least a couple of changes that most certainly need to be made. How much, one of the complaints that I hear from a lot of growers is that they feel they're cut out of the process and that they don't really have adequate opportunity to kind of express concerns or work with the NDA towards crafting something that, may be more favorable to them. So what's our plan going forward? How much more are we going to be able to kind of be heard and participate and, you know, kind of structure these in the way to give us the best chance we can under the confinements that are placed on us.
I mean, you know, that's what this whole process is about, is getting your feedback, and again, I appreciate everybody's detail so that we can create a program that's meeting federal expectations, but that works for our industry. We want to see you succeed. We don't want to have anything stricter than what we're required for federal expectations. So, you know, we will go back and look at the comments that have been made, some revisions. We'll work with Legislative Counsel Bureau in refining that draft, R145-20. We definitely have some follow-up discussion to have with USDA on some of the things that we've talked about today too, and we'll see what they come back with, and we'll report back on what we find through the public process.
Can we have another workshop before the notice of intent to adopt regulations is publicly noticed?
Let me see what we get back from, we have a lot to discuss just from this one. Let me see what we get back from USDA, especially on timing. Timing is a significant concern, and if they're flat out, you need to do it this way, you know, we'll take the comments that we definitely, you know, are able to apply, but whatever we need to do to meet federal regulations, is what we're doing. So hang tight, let us do the legwork involved here first and see what happens.
Thank you.
With that, I don't see any other comments. We will conclude the workshop. Again, if you guys need access to the proposed regulation, we will send the registered document once we have a chance to review what LCDs put together, implement some of these changes, and work with them, work with USDA, and we're finding some of the language, and we'll get that back out to you when we can. We know that this is critical, and we don't want to be missing deadlines that we're going to compromise our program. Our goal is to make sure we can proceed. So thank you for being here. I know this an hour and a half out of your day right now is pretty critical with all that's going on. With that, we will conclude the hearing. It's about 11:05 on August 27th, 2020. And this concludes workshop for 557, R145-20. Thank you, everybody.